Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and what a great thing to do the day before this podcast gets released is to record the podcast. It's kind of funny because all week, it's not to say I've been dreading, because truly sitting down and recording the podcast is probably my favorite part of the entire week. But I've just been having these thoughts of like, what am I going to talk to them about today? And I have such a slew of ideas, but actually putting them into action and creating an outline and really diving deep into what I believe you might want to hear and what I would have wanted to hear if I think back to my past self that was kind of starting this health journey. And so that takes a little bit of brain power, but we're here. We're together. We get to spend the next however many minutes just chatting on here, and I couldn't be more happy to be able to talk to you. So this week, I feel like my catch-up has a lot to do with how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit, so it's all really going to be wrapped into one. But today's episode is titled, I'm Bloated. So we're getting into digestive health, the inflammation assessment that I do with every one-on-one client, what's normal or what should be normal for you, and how you can start healing today. So digestive inflammation is probably the number one thing that I talk about with clients, and when we work together, it is almost always the number one area of inflammation or the highest levels of inflammation. And we'll dive into the nitty-gritty details of why that is, but it is just going to be a jam-packed episode with everything I've learned about digestive health and how you can truly take a hold of that digestive health and not live in pain and discomfort for the rest of your life, okay? Because it's not too late to change. So getting into the catch-up of today's episode, like I had said, it has a lot to do with how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit, because I feel like I've been very social the last week since I last chatted with you. So I had a birthday party on Saturday. On Saturday, I also went fall shopping for some decorations, went clothing shopping with my friend Katie. And then today, it is Tuesday, the 12th. And this morning, drove up to Omaha really early, had a grocery store navigation session with a client, and then got lunch with a new friend. And so what I've been really trying to do, and this was kind of what I set out for in July, because with what I do as my job, right, as coaching, the summer is very, very slow for me. And so I set out in July with a goal just to make connections. That was my number one. What I wanted to focus on is just making connections with people and building relationships with no motive behind it, right? Wanting to build genuine relationships with people and it not have it be because I want them as a client or I want to, talk at their business, or it was just solely building connections, and that was what I wanted to do. And so through that, I have been forced to get out of my comfort zone and put myself in situations that previously I would have said, heck no, I'm going to just maybe say I've got something else going on and not show up to that. But because that was my goal, I've also realized how valuable community is. And that's truly what is nourishing my mind, body, and spirit recently, is just being in community. And community for me doesn't always look the same. So there's a few different areas where I feel very close to people. The first one is going to be those close friendships or groups of friends. So like the birthday party I was at this last weekend, it wasn't everybody that I'm super close friends with, right? It was some friends from high school, friends I had met while living in Omaha. But being surrounded by other women in that group, it just felt so comfortable, and so like leaving that, I felt energized. And from somebody who talking to people and being with people used to absolutely zap me of energy, it now gives me so much life. And even being around new people is giving me life, which is honestly just bizarre for me to say because, like I said, it used to be draining. Another area that I see community is church. So we go to a couple different churches. We go to one here where we've moved. That's about an hour and a half outside of Omaha, right? So we're not living in Omaha anymore. We're just in rural Nebraska. And so we go to the church that I grew up in. And that is just, for me, comforting because it's a lot of familiar faces in a community that I really, really love. And on the other hand, we also go back to Omaha. We're trying to do this now a couple times a month, is go back to our church in Omaha. And that is another area where you feel community. And in church too, I feel like spiritually, that is just so nourishing, right? Because, the church we go to in Omaha, we're singing, we're worshiping. Like many weeks, I'm nearly brought to tears because just you can feel the Lord moving in that space, and you're surrounded by so many other believers or people who are, healing or growing a relationship with God. I mean, we all are, but, you're able to be surrounded with people that are wanting the same thing, right? You're there to worship God. That is such a powerful community to put yourself into. Another way that I see community is I've started group exercise classes here where we live. And we are on week 3, and it's just so exciting. I kind of get giddy when I talk about it because although I don't know, personally, on a personal level, every single person I teach in exercise classes, right? Because I just don't, and that takes time to grow those relationships. But as somebody who works from home, to have a community to go to that has the similar motive, right? They want to exercise, they want to move their body, and to have so many women in a room with that mutual goal of exercise, it's just been really fun to lead. And so, I literally get goosebumps when I talk about community because I've realized that in the past, my community was very, I would say, small, and I was just talking to a friend about this today, is how I feel like I can put myself into almost any environment and I can make conversation with people. I can be outgoing if I need to be. I can be quiet if I need to be. And not that I alter my personality at all, but there's different sides of my personality that comes out. And I really feel like I'm a good mesher. I can mesh groups. I feel like I can insert myself into a group and make everyone feel comfortable and included, or at least that's my goal. When I lived in Omaha, I believe that my mentality around community was very woe is me. I moved into a new community. Nobody's inviting me to XYZ. Nobody's accepting me. I don't have any friends here. Or I have friends here, but I don't see them very often. It was just so many negatives that I just let pile up. And those started to be my excuse for not finding community. We did find our church, but in reality, and people don't want to hear this, but sometimes you have to take building community into your own hands. So it's easy to sit back and think, well, why is nobody inviting me out to do, this activity? Or why am I not as close to people at work as, my other friends? And, and I even noticed that some in high school too, is when you're not invited or included into groups, you feel so sorry for yourself. But if you think back, when was the last time you invited a group of people to get together? And when I ask myself that question, it kind of is like, oh, wow, I am just as much at fault about not creating the community that I so deeply desire. Rather, I've just been sitting back and expecting it to happen when that's just not always the reality. Sometimes you have to be the person to message someone on Instagram and say, hey, I think you're really cool. Would you like to go get lunch sometime or get coffee sometime? It feels so uncomfortable. And I know social media is a way we like to really connect, but truly connect. If you're on social media, and I come across this so many times, I'll reach out to somebody oh my gosh, you're so cool. I really love what you're doing. I'd love to know more about XYZ. Would you want to get coffee? Sometimes people just leave me on read and don't respond. And you kind of have to let that roll off your back and then try again, right? It's not you being creepy in the DMs or slimy. Like, there's no alternative motive to wanting to meet with that person other than you truly want a genuine friendship. And, maybe the person you're messaging isn't, in the space to receive that right now. And you have to understand, okay, that's fine. Like, let me, talk to somebody else. Like, I've met some really, really great friends through just social media outreach. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, that makes me super nervous. Like, what would I say to them? Use me as a trial. Like, if you follow me on Instagram and obviously if you don't want to spend time with me, I understand. But also if you're like, oh my gosh, like I listened to your podcast or I know you through so-and-so, would you like to get coffee? I promise I'm not going to leave you on red unless you're a slimy, creepy old guy that has alternative motives, right? I want female friendships and I want genuine friendships and I want supportive friendships. And I know that you have to sometimes find that yourself. You can't expect people to come to you. So that's just why I say that, to reassure you. If you're like, okay, but how do I do that? Like, send me a message. I promise you, I am the most forgiving, understanding person. At least I try to be. Okay, don't quote me on that because maybe not all the time. But when it comes to somebody genuinely wanting to have a relationship with me, I am so interested in that. And I genuinely want a relationship in return, right? Or I want to support you how I can. Maybe you don't want to talk to me or hang out with me, but you're like, hey, I saw you're friends with so-and-so. Like, are they cool? Would they be cool with me sending them a DM? Like, okay, I'll tell you. I'll tell you if they would or if they, would be, I don't know. I would like to think a lot of my friends also want other friends too. But it's just kind of that age we're at where you're, maybe you're in college or you're out of college or you're in high school or you're in your, your early married years or you're single in your upper 20s, like, or maybe you're older than that and you're married and you have 4 kids and you're like, I need community. Like, that is something that you might need to go find, and I know how hard it can be to do that. So just know you're not alone, and I don't say this all to preach that I am the best at connecting with old friends or connecting with friends in general. I'm not always the best at that, right? But if you are seeking something and you don't know what it is, community might be that void that you're looking for. So that's just what I would encourage you to do, or kind of reflect on this next week is, am I lacking community? Am I lacking friendships? Right? Because that has been so nourishing for my mind, body, and spirit. And I think it might be for you too. I want to take a quick break from today's episode to talk about something very near and dear to my heart: one-on-one coaching. Through my signature coaching program, Nourish to Flourish, I work with women to not only focus on decreasing their overall inflammation, but healing their relationship with food and doing the necessary mindset work to make these changes long-lasting. If you're looking to improve the way you feel and truly make changes that last a lifetime by identifying the exact source of your inflammation, finding health-improving recipes that align with your goals, grocery shop with a nutrition coach, and be gracefully guided along the way, then this program is for you. Inflammation shows up in so many ways, but this might look like brain fog, fatigue, stress, chronic pain, general discomfort, headaches, constipation, frequent trips to the restroom, bloating, anxiety, weight gain, abdominal pain, restless sleep, but know that it doesn't have to be this way. Learn more by applying and going to my website, which will be linked in today's show notes. Feel good in your skin, never count calories again, heal your relationship with food, and let's nourish to flourish. All right, so you're bloated and you clicked on today's episode because you want to be not bloated. Let's talk about it, okay? So what I do with every one-on-one client is we take what's called an inflammation assessment. Okay, so this is a series of questions that kind of help you pinpoint where inflammation is showing up in your specific body. So there are 7 different areas that you might notice inflammation. So this is going to be your brain and nervous system, digestive system, which is what we're talking about today, detoxification system, blood sugar and insulin system, hormonal endocrine system, musculoskeletal system, and autoimmunity inflammation system. So you can see there's a lot of ways that you could see inflammation, but I would say the core number one area that people come to me with is digestive system inflammation. And also, digestive system inflammation triggers a lot of the other areas of inflammation. So just to kind of briefly talk about like what is an inflammation assessment, right? I said it's a series of questions that we ask in each category. Okay, so what this could look like is, so you're going to score in each category. So, the numbers would go up fairly high, but you want to be under 4 and for sure under 8 in an area to consider yourself, not super inflamed in that category. Okay, so how I kind of talk about it or explain is if you score a 0 to 1, you're in optimal health zone. That's the zone that you'll find yourself in. If you're in, about a 2 to a 4, you're in an area of good health. Okay, so you can see really quick 0 to 4, like that is the prime spot you want to be scoring in. Okay, if you are in a 5 to 7 range, that is what's called the zone of false wellness. So although you might look physically healthy, maybe you're super fit, but you have really bad acne or you have fatigue constantly throughout the day. Maybe you have varying emotions or you're always hungry and you don't know why. All of those signs of inflammation that I share about all the time, you might notice those every now and again, but it's not anything super constant. If anybody on the street looked at you, they'd say, all right, she's pretty healthy or he's pretty healthy. Okay, so where it gets really dicey is when you get above an 8. So 8 to 9 is called poor health. So most days, rather than not, you feel pretty miserable and you might not even know why. There might be no exact reason. You might not have pinpointed where inflammation is coming from yet, but that is what you'll see there is just poor health. So you might start getting on medications, or you might go to the doctor and they say, hey, something in your blood work was a little concerning, or they might say, hey, you're pre-diabetic. Like, let's look at some lifestyle changes to prevent you from being diagnosed with diabetes. Okay. If you score above a 10 in that area, that is an area of chronic health problems. So most clients, I would say the first time we take this, we do it 3 times. So the beginning of working together, middle, and at the end. Most times they score above a 10 in more than one category. Okay. And so I always reassure that this is an assessment, right? It's a series of questions. It doesn't mean you need to go to your doctor and say you're dying, because that's not the case. We don't freak out about it, but above a 10 means that either you are currently experiencing a chronic health problem in that area, or you don't already have something diagnosed, but you feel like it's pretty prevalent and it might be manifesting its way into disease. Okay, so inflammation is the source of all disease. And once you understand that, you can kind of backtrack on maybe where things started becoming a little off, okay? Or what those symptoms looked like for you when you initially started not feeling your best. So the thing is because there's 7 areas, if you score above an 8 in more than one area, you're considered polyinflammatory. So, obviously poly, that means inflammation in more than one area. And I would say 80% of the clients that I work with are considered polyinflammatory. Actually, I'd probably even push that to 90%. It is almost everyone, and that is not a diss on the people I work with. Love them dearly, right? But there is a reason that they're seeking help. If you do not feel your best and you don't know where inflammation is coming from, the inflammation assessment is the best tool that I've found to help clients discover that, so then we can dive into healing that inflammation in general. So that's kind of a brief overview of the inflammation assessment. If this is something you're ever interested in just taking by itself, so maybe you don't want additional coaching, you're like, I just want to know where my health concerns are coming from. I do assessments with individuals for we meet for a one-on-one call. We do the assessment together. That is a service that I offer if that's something you'd be interested in. Although I would always encourage, if you notice in your assessment that your scores are a little high, I would always recommend that even if it's not me, but that you would find somebody to help guide you along the way to decrease the inflammation in your body. Okay, so that was kind of a side note, but I wanted to let you know if I'm talking about this and you're like, whoa, like how would I know that about myself? Like, just reach out to me in any way. There's many ways you can contact me, and we can definitely take that together. But that's not really the purpose of today's episode. That's just kind of that foreshadowing that I want you to know about before we talk about digestive health, okay? Because it is such a prevalent issue in society today. Okay, so there are a lot of reasons that digestive inflammation might be showing up for you, right? It could be considering the quality of food you're eating. Maybe you have a lack of a balanced diet. Maybe you're on a surplus of medications or supplements. You might also have some confusion around food, first, understanding what's healthy and what's, quote, healthy and what's, quote, not healthy, right? I don't often say like that's healthy or that's not healthy, because everything in moderation, does have a place, is what I believe. But at the same time, we can't consistently eat a diet that's not supporting our health and expect ourselves to feel our best, And so that's where it gets tricky, because there's also that mental health side of things that can cause digestive inflammation. And I'm not going into that piece of this today, because next week I have on my friend Emily, and she is a mental health practitioner. So she's going to be talking about that mind-body or that mind-gut connection and how that relates to just our lifestyle and how we physically feel, mentally feel, and ways we can work through that. All right, so I'm not diving into that necessarily today, but I will be talking about what's normal, what's not normal, what digestive health actually means. What if you have poor digestive health? What would that feel like? The timing of food, habits you can create around food to help with this, and then why movement is important for your digestive health as well. Okay, so I want to tell you, and this is something I've talked to a client before in the past, but she was like, I just don't get why people think that how they feel is normal. Like, how do they truly believe that they feel miserable, but that's normal for them? And for some people, like, that really is the reality, right? Sometimes we become so out of tune with our body that we think what we feel is normal, when in reality, it isn't normal. Okay, so something that's not related necessarily to digestive inflammation, but what I've heard all the time, especially since I started getting my period, is that, well, yeah, periods are just painful. They're just painful, and you just kind of want to feel like a blob and lay around all day and eat a bunch of food, and you're just kind of feel miserable, right? I remember there were times in high school that I would skip school, especially in the mornings, because my period cramps were so bad. Like, I could not find a single position that I felt comfortable in. And I'm here to tell you that that is not normal, right? We're told our whole, female lives, I feel like, that it's normal to just feel miserable on your period, but it's not. Okay, that is a sign that there's something else going on in your body that, is causing that inflammation, especially around that time of the month. And that's not to say you're always going to feel perfect, right? I have injuries in my low back, fractures in my L4, L5 vertebrae, and a bulging disc. I still have that. I've lived with that for years. And before my period, it still gets inflamed. So I'm not saying you're not going to feel a little bit of discomfort, but you should not feel absolutely miserable for 7 days and believe that that is normal. Okay, so when it comes to digestion and how you feel is not normal there, I remember back in college when I would eat at the sorority house at Wesleyan. And so when we would eat, I just remember girls coming down after we'd eaten, or maybe we were at meeting, it was a few hours after we had supper, and they're like, oh, I'm just so bloated. That food just made me feel so disgusting. Like I'm bloated all the time. I don't even remember the last time I wasn't bloated. And I am calling myself out because I was one of them, and I was doing nothing about it. Nothing. I was just like, oh, it's just because, they use different ingredients, but what am I supposed to do, right? Sometimes you can't cook every meal for yourself, so you have to eat something. Maybe that's going to make you not feel so great, but it's not normal to constantly be bloated. And that is the reality for so many people, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit about poop on here. And so if you need to giggle, just go ahead and get it out, because what I tell people, and if you're not in the medical realm, it feels super funny to hear somebody be so open about talking about that. I always, when we do the inflammation assessment initially, digestive inflammation, there are so many talks or so many questions about, what does your poop look like? Are you constipated? Whatever. I'm just here to tell you, I'm going to talk about it on this call, because if you're dealing with digestive not on this call, oh my gosh, on this podcast episode, because if you're dealing with digestive inflammation, you're probably going to be experiencing that, and it's okay, right? You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell your friends that you're experiencing these issues too, but I'm going to talk about them, kind of get them out on the table. So we just wanted to put that warning out there, okay? Because it's something I talk about so often, it doesn't even feel funny or awkward or uncomfortable anymore. But this is the first time you're hearing someone talk so longly about poop. It's going to maybe feel a little bit weird, okay? So I'm glad we got that out of the way. But when it comes to your digestive health, okay, so let's dive into what a compromised digestive health or digestive system would look like. Okay, so I talk a lot about bloating. Bloating is very common. That's a sign that there's something going on in your system that is not necessarily agreeing with your body. Okay, another thing could be reflux. So let's say you eat watermelon, tomatoes, and when you eat that, it goes down and it just feels like it wants to come back up. Okay, you might even burp or you feel something left over in your throat, okay? That is a sign that there is some sort of pushback coming from your digestive system, and it's not necessarily agreeing with the food that you ate. Okay, so a lot of times that's foods that are acidic or really high in water content. You might also notice that if you drink a lot of water before you eat. I know kind of like a weight loss tool in probably the early 2000s when everything was extremely toxic, but was to, drink a couple glasses of water before you eat and you won't eat as much. Like, what a great way to, kind of satiate your hunger. Okay, well, I'm here to tell you that I actually do not recommend that you drink water while you're eating, not before, not during, but after. Okay, so if you think about it, when you are drinking water, you're putting so much water into your digestive system, right? It's liquid. It's kind of soupy down there, all right? That's just what I visualize. Kind of soupy down there. Okay, so say you take then a solid food. So let's just take a chicken breast, for example. So you're eating chicken and it goes into your system where there's a lot of water floating around, okay? Mixed in with the water is also your stomach acid. That breaks down the food. Okay, so if you've got a lot of water and you got a lot of acid, water and acid don't really jive together super well. Okay, so they're kind of like separating, they're kind of floating in there together. And this might be totally inaccurate, but I think this is the best way to visualize it. So they're floating around together and then plop in comes like a chicken breast or some solid food, and it needs to break down that food while also working through the water that is also kind of merging in with the stomach acid. Okay, so if you can kind of visualize that, you don't want a highly acidic area, which would be your stomach, right? The stomach acid, to have to also work on balancing with the water. Okay, so if you're drinking a lot of water before you eat, you might notice some reflux afterwards, right? Food comes back up, or you have the hiccups, or you just maybe have a burning in your esophagus, okay? That can be a sign of digestive compromise. Okay, right? That's acid reflux, and acid reflux is not normal. Okay, so I know a lot of times kids at young ages will get prescribed medication for acid reflux. My husband did, and he took that until I would say maybe college. I'm not 100% sure, but when I started diving into nutrition and inflammation, I'm like, honey, like taking that medication is not normal. Like that should not have been the number one thing that your doctor did for you. They should have looked at your eating habits or maybe the foods you were eating, right? Those highly acidic foods, foods high in water content. That is your tomatoes, that's your watermelon. Those are foods that can cause reflux. And that's because of the fiber, which water, is it. There's fiber in the form of water, right? Water-soluble fiber in fruit. And so when that is in your system, right, it causes reflux. So that could be something you're noticing, okay? Or that burning in kind of that chest area or down your esophagus, okay? This could look like the inability to poop, right? Maybe you're constipated and you don't know the last time you actually pooped. And so that's something that is not normal, right? It's not normal to be constipated because that affects your mood. It affects how active you want to be. It affects your self-esteem, right? If you feel bloated and uncomfortable and everything is so tight down in your lower abdomen, that's not what we want, right? And that's not something that you should have to live with. That's not something that should be a normal for you. Or you could be on the opposite side of the spectrum and you have no idea when an episode is going to come when you have to urgently use the restroom. When you're unable to tell when that's coming on, right, that is a sign as well that, oh, okay, so maybe my body is not reacting the best to this certain food. That could be how that's showing up for you. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about my personal experiences with that, not to get TMI, but what I will say is if you're noticing constipation or diarrhea, okay, that could be a sign that you have an intolerance. So what I want you to do, this is a tangible takeaway, is if you eat something that you think you might have an intolerance to, so say you maybe think you're lactose intolerant, but you're not 100% sure. I want you to consume a dairy product and wait 6 to 8 hours to see how your body physically feels. Okay, so from that time that you ate it, count forward 6 to 8 hours and then reflect. Like, do I feel any different than I did before? Or do I feel the same? Do I feel like my stomach is getting upset? Do I feel, just all of those things that we don't want in our system, right? So that is when you're going to kind of track that. Okay, so then after that, it's going to take another 6 to 8 hours for your body to process through and kind of get that out of your system. Okay, so it's 6 to 8 hours before you feel the effects of the food and maybe notice the bloating and discomfort. And then it is another 6 to 8 hours for your body to really get that food out of your system. So really the whole process of getting all of the components that maybe are causing inflammation in your gut out of your body is either like a 12 to 16 hour long process. So you can see very quickly how if you're continuing to eat foods that are highly processed, highly inflammatory, contain all of those inflammatory oils and high fructose corn syrup and artificial colors and flavors, you can see so quickly how your body is just never able to catch up, right? So you're always eating those foods that are just not making you feel good, and maybe you haven't identified what those are yet, and that is okay, right? Because that's something there are experts or there are coaches, people like me out there that are willing to help you through that, okay? But if you're continuing to eat those foods that just make you feel worse, worse, and worse, and you never actually give your body the chance to breathe, to just consume, those really nutrient-dense foods, cooked vegetables, fresh fruit, whole grains, sourdough bread, rice. Like, I know it might not be initially the most interesting and exciting menu to create, but I really think giving your body the chance to just figure out and sort through what makes it feel good and what makes you feel bloated and uncomfortable and, moody and just inflamed down in your abdomen, tightness in your lower stomach, I really think you're going to notice a huge improvement in how you feel if it's not constantly overwhelmed and having to sort, the good and the bad. Okay, so with that, there comes that gut-brain connection. Okay, so similar to how I had said, I would highly encourage you to track when you eat something and how you feel 6 to 8 hours afterwards. That is working on that gut-brain gut-brain connection, okay? Having the ability to understand how your body feels and truly live in tune with your physical body is something that takes a lot of time if it's been kind of compromised at a young age. Okay, so if growing up, you were a family that forced you to eat everything on your plate, regardless of if you were hungry or not, you might notice that you're not really able to tell when you're actually hungry and when you're actually full. Okay, that connection has been severed. Okay, so that means that you frequently eat, or you frequently overeat, or you undereat because you're never hungry and your metabolism is absolutely tanked. Okay, that is all part of that gut-brain connection, is just having an understanding of how you are physically feeling, right? So maybe you're noticing bloating, but can you trace back in your mind to when you didn't feel bloated? Was it right away when you woke up? Was it right before you went to bed? Like, when was that moment? And then when did that change for you? Okay, so, honestly, also, our bodies, most of us, I would say, don't truly know what hunger feels like. We live in such an abundant society, and I'm going to speak for myself there because obviously I don't know your food situation. Maybe that's not the case for you, but I would say with most of the people really close to me, we don't truly know what it feels like to not maybe financially be able to support us eating at least 1 to 2 meals a day. Okay, so our body is actually never alerting us that it is hungry because we're not giving it the opportunity to do that. So if you think about all the snacks that are packed when you're younger, or how you plan out all 3 meals of the day, or how you want to make sure, like, if you're out and about and you're running errands, well, I really want to grab a coffee because I'm thirsty. Well, maybe your body just wants water, but instead you're going to fill your system with a latte. And I'm absolutely guilty of that. That's no judgment, but it's just the reality, right? Food is so convenient day to day. You're hungry and you're out and about and it's not lunch or supper time. Well, heck, let's get a 6-piece chicken nuggets from McDonald's because it's right across the street from Walmart. There is so much abundance and convenience. And so when we lose that gut-brain connection, we lose those hunger signals. Okay, when we are always feeding our body and never giving it the chance to talk back to us, we are, kind of ruining that connection. So being hungry, feeling hungry, and physically feeling the symptom of being hungry is a good thing. Okay, I recently did a post on Instagram about this, and I had mentioned it is a good thing. Obviously, depending on your economic situation or your financial situation, just with what's going on in the world, I know everything is so expensive, but if you are somebody who you have enough food in your home that it would make you full if you utilized it, right? And you don't know what feeling hungry feels like, I would encourage you to, actually notice when you get hungry throughout the day. Okay, so when you are waking up, I'll get into the movement piece of this, but when you wake up in the morning, I want you to wait to eat breakfast until you notice either your mood, you're getting hangry, combination of hungry and angry, right? I'm very guilty of being hangry. Okay, so you get hangry, you notice your stomach is growling, you're getting a headache, you wake up and you have absolutely no energy, you feel groggy, you've got brain fog, you can't focus at work. That is going to be a sign that your body needs some food. Okay, so when you feel your stomach growl, especially, that is the number one signal. I want you to note when that is. And then the next time you eat, I want you to, again, feel that hunger signal or those hunger signals. There's a lot. I would say most common you're going to feel is either hangriness, being really moody, or your stomach growling. Okay, so that is when I want you to also then consume some food and then wait again and see, when is my stomach, growling? Well, maybe it's not at a specific time in the day, or maybe it's not at a specific meal time, but if your body's alerting you that you're hungry, I want you to allow your body to then consume something rather than just mindlessly consuming food throughout the day with not even really feeling hungry and just eating to eat. I want you to rather pay attention to your hunger signals. Okay? And really, especially if you feel like that connection is lost, that is something that can take time to build up. But I want to encourage you to really focus on that. If that's something, that you are wanting to work on, which I think it should be the goal of everyone, because how I link this back to digestive inflammation is when your stomach is full. And even though you're full, you're going to continue to eat and eat and eat. A great example is holidays, right? I'm guilty of doing this to myself, but for a lot of people, this is day-to-day life, right? So think of like Thanksgiving. You go back, you get that one mounded plate full of food, and you eat it all because you were hungry, right? You ate it all. But then they come out with the dessert, and there's 6 different desserts to choose from, and you're like, well, how on earth can I pick just one? I'm going to eat all 6. Maybe a slice of all 6, okay? So then you eat the dessert, even though like your stomach is so full, it feels like it could burst, okay? But you continue to eat the dessert because you want the dessert. Emotionally, that's what you're craving, okay? So say, you eat that meal, and then afterwards you let your body digest. Well, supper comes around and you ate so much for lunch and that you are really not even hungry for supper, but you continue to eat, another plate of food, even though your body's not alerting you that it is hungry. Okay, so you can kind of quickly see, and that is a very extreme example, but you can really quickly see how if you're never giving your digestive system a chance to catch up, if it's always forced to be digesting a lot of food, it is always kind of in overdrive, right? And so when that happens, it's constantly working. You might notice that bloating, or you feel groggy and your brain is so foggy that you can't think clearly, right? That's because your digestive system is like, whoa, like we're getting too much food and I can't work this fast. And so I'm going to then, as a result, kind of push back. You notice the reflux. You're feeling like a burning in your throat. That is all kind of a sign that your body is just overwhelmed and it doesn't maybe need that much food. And I'm not criticizing, right, if you overeat, because that's a normal thing to do on holidays. Maybe I shouldn't have used holidays as an example, but that is like the one time where I really noticed that mind-gut connection for me is extremely severed, right? Because my stomach expands to hold all this food, right? I notice bloating, my stomach feels tight and uncomfortable. And then if I'm never able to actually release that food that same day, right, through pooping, okay, there's that word again, right? If I'm not able to do that, then that's when you start to feel the constipation and you feel so uncomfortable because all of that food is in your system and it's not working its way out. Okay, there is something that's preventing it from getting out of your system, which is what you would then need to focus on. Okay, so quality of food is obviously a huge piece of this. If you have high quality food, your body is going to love and appreciate that food. It's going to absorb all of those good nutrients in that food. And in return, it's going to give you all the positives that come from eating a really well-rounded diet, right? The energy, the regularity when you go to the restroom or day to day, the positive mood. Maybe you get better sleep and you wake up energized. Like, there are so many benefits that come from eating high quality food and identifying any intolerances or sensitivities you have. So especially with digestive inflammation, I work with clients on this process of removing and replacing. Okay, so if you came to me and you're like, hey, I just don't feel really good when I eat this food. So say dairy is an example. Well, let's remove dairy. And let's replace it with something that can kind of fill the void. That is still a good option. It's not going to make you feel deprived, right? And let's see how you feel for 1 week. Okay, let's see how you feel for 2 weeks. Like, was dairy the issue, or do you still feel the exact same that you did before? Okay, when you're able to identify these intolerances or sensitivities that you have, you're able to also understand why you're feeling bloated. So for me, being lactose intolerant, if I was to consume a giant bowl of ice cream and have a piece of pizza with like regular cheese on it, for the next, 12 to 16 hours, I'm probably going to feel pretty miserable. Or, I'm going to notice that my skin breaks out and I'm bloated way more often than usual and my regularity has stopped. Okay? Those are signs that there's something in your food that's not making you feel really good. And then that's when digestive stress happens. Okay, so dairy and gluten are kind of a beast of their own. I know you can get a sensitivity test for that. How I personally recommend going about that is just removing it from your diet for a length of time and evaluating how you feel, which is what I do with clients, okay? The next one is the timing of your food. So on the post that I had about digestive inflammation, I talked a lot about the timing of your food because it's a huge role, okay? So I talked about identifying when you notice those hunger signals, like what is that time frame for you? Another big piece is when you are eating. Okay, so I always recommend food before coffee or any form of caffeine. Okay, or food with coffee or some form of caffeine. Okay, so when coffee, which is really acidic, we've talked about this in the beginning of the episode, coffee is really acidic. It goes down into your stomach and mixes with your stomach acid. Okay, it's going to give a little bit of feedback if it doesn't have something to absorb the acidity of the coffee, right? So you're mixing acid with acid in your stomach, okay? Kind of different types of acid, I suppose, if that's a thing. I'm not 100% sure. But, that's where you need to have something in your system. Not only does this help with digestive inflammation, helps with balancing your blood sugar levels, hormonal inflammation, all of the other areas that we see inflammation in your body, right? I said there's 7. That is going to greatly improve how you feel, okay? If food is the first thing to hit your system. The next time that I would recommend you would stop eating food is 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. All right, so I know, and I'm very guilty of this too, is that bedtime snack, right? 9 o'clock rolls around, you really could get in bed and start reading or, kind of unwinding for the day. But instead you're like, man, or at least this is me, I would really love a bowl of cereal. Yeah, I think that's what I want. Like, that's what I tell myself almost every single night, I'd probably say. And sometimes I give into it, right? Because if you've had an active day, like, eat the cereal. I'm such an advocate about finding balance and finding what works for you. So when I talk about this, I'm talking to everyone, but that doesn't mean that, this specific rule applies to everyone. But what I will say is that if you wake up in the morning and you have a lot of gas, or you're bloated, or like you wake up already feeling uncomfortable, it's most likely because you ate too close to bedtime. And maybe the quality of your food before bedtime wasn't super great. Okay, so think like late night pizza. Okay, that's not going to make you feel super great in the morning because although yes, your body should have had some time to digest that, it is 6 to 8 hours after you eat that food that you're going to feel the effects. So think about that. You eat it at 9 o'clock. About the time you wake up in the morning, 8 hours later, you're going to not feel super great. You're going to be gassy, you're going to be bloated, you're going to be uncomfortable. And that's just really not the way that you should have to start your day. Okay, so, this isn't, I know when I was in all my nutrition classes, they said, well, if you eat before bed, you're going to gain weight. And I suppose it was because when you're sleeping, you're sedentary. But the truth is like, it's nothing related to weight gain or weight loss to have or to not have a bedtime snack. But how I view it is if your digestive health is failing, then this is something that I would encourage you to do because it's probably a contributing factor. So think about it. If you go to bed around 10 o'clock, I'd encourage your last meal being over by 7 o'clock. All right, maybe it's time to eat with the old people, right? Like 5 o'clock, 5:30. I remember when I was volunteering at the High Plains Alzheimer's Center in Lincoln, I would volunteer there after class. So it was usually about like 3 to 5. When I was just leaving, they were rolling out the plates of food. I'm like, yeah, 5 o'clock, got to get dinner early so you can watch the news at 6, I guess. And, it works for them. But it's maybe that's what you need to do. Eat a little bit earlier. All right, eating late at night, probably not going to make you feel super great in the morning. And I want you to start your day feeling really great because, you deserve that, really. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about today is why movement is so important and crucial to your digestive health. All right, so when you get up and move your body, I know I talked in last week's episode about exercise and how if you move your body in the morning, you're kind of activating all the systems in your body to start, doing their thing. So that is including your digestive system, right? Any food left over there, let's process that, let's digest that. I mean, it was doing that while you were sleeping as well, but let's push that through your system. Let's start the day feeling regular, okay? So that's where movement is going to come in. So I would recommend, I don't wear an Apple Watch, but if you do, maybe that 8,000 to 10,000 step range, or just being active, okay? So this doesn't look like working out super hard in the morning and then sitting around all day and then not doing anything before you go to bed, but rather maybe get up in the morning, move your body a little, do an exercise if that's the time you like to work out, and then around lunch, get up, move around a little, do a deep clean of your house really quick, go do some laundry or go outside for a walk. And then in the evening, what me and Nathan love to do is go for a walk together, because it gives us both a time to really decompress about our day and just talk about what's going on for us, how we're feeling emotionally, physically. It's just a really good thing to grow relationships. So kind of wrapping in community, like I talked about in the beginning. If you have a friend or a spouse or a parent, have them go out for a walk with you after supper. We call it a post-nourishment walk. That's going to keep that digestive system activated or activate it. It's going to balance your blood sugar levels, and really movement does support regularity. And most of the time, the cause of bloating is a lack of regularity. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about with movement. But after, I've talked a lot about digestive inflammation. I dove into a lot of different things. I want to let you know that if you have questions, you can always message me about this. And I'm more than happy to talk with you about what I've explained on today's episode, but it's just all things that I really believe you should know and that we just aren't taught. Unless you do the work to deep dive into what is inflammation and how can it show up in my body, you're not really going to have that deeper understanding of what is happening in your system. So if you're somebody that is bloated, if you read the title of this episode and you're like, yep, that's me, clicking on this one, please rest assured that you don't have to feel that way, and it's not normal to feel that way, and you don't need to let other people make you think it's normal, even though they're experiencing the same thing as you. That doesn't mean it's normal, all right? And that you can find relief from digestive inflammation, but it does take a little bit of work. And so, if you are feeling that right now and you're like, I don't feel my best, but I don't know if I want to put in the work to feel my best, that's something I think you should dive a little deeper into as well, because you have to be ready to feel your best, and there is some sacrifice that comes with it. But I really, I promise you that the benefits absolutely outweigh, the minor sacrifices you have to give up, like eating your ultra-processed food all the time and the convenience of fast food for supper with your family, right? Some of those things that you have to find balance with, that you can't just cling to and kind of sulk, because, and I say this from personal experience, when I didn't know that I was lactose intolerant, I lived up until I was 20 years old not knowing that. When you are uncomfortable, you just kind of want to feel sorry for yourself and get on whatever medication you can to help. But when you realize the medication is also causing adverse side effects, or the medication isn't actually helping the best way you think it can, then it's time to start looking at food and supplementation. And that's something I'm not going to dive into specifics of, because it really is person to person, is what supplements, your body needs. But just know you can find relief, and it doesn't have to feel restrictive or overcomplicated or confusing, but you can, heal your digestive inflammation if that's something that you really want to do. All right. So if you enjoyed this episode, I would just encourage you to leave a rating and or review on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I don't know if you guys really realize how big of a difference that makes, and just getting my podcast out to more people's ears and to really be able to help more people. It does kind of rely on people like you that listen weekly or maybe have just found this podcast, that decide to give it a 5-star rating or leave me a little bit of a review. And if you do that, you can go ahead and screenshot that and send it to me through any form of communication, and I'll get you entered into the Wellness Bundle giveaway. That is going to be drawn at the end of the year. If you post this episode on your Instagram story and tag me, you also get additional entries into that giveaway. All right, so if you or a friend or a family member are dealing with digestive inflammation, always talking about how terrible they feel, I would just encourage you to send this episode to them so they can get the help that they really deserve to have. All right, so I'm just going to close this episode in prayer real quick, okay? So, dear Lord, just thank you for this day, and thank you that I get to hop on here and talk about something that I am just so absolutely passionate about. I hope that whoever, listened to this episode and related to it just so deeply, that they understand that they don't need to feel that way, and that there are resources and people and ways to heal that, although, might require the sacrifice, that they just feel the push to just do it and to just eat the high quality food and find what works for their body so they don't have to live in pain and suffering anymore. Lord, there's just so much pain and discomfort and uncomfortableness just happening so much in our world today. I just ask that the people who create our food, that they just feel the push to want to heal society too. And that also, the person looking to heal is able to just have that knowledge and understanding to decipher what is benefiting their health and what isn't. And that they just feel not overwhelmed, not confused, not discouraged, but rather that there's hope, that they truly can fix the way they feel, that they can decrease the bloating and the uncomfortableness that, impacts their life day to day, impacts their self-esteem. And I just ask that they feel so loved and cherished and supported along that whole journey. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you again so much for listening to another episode, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday.